In 1963, there was a man in Britain earning about £18 a week. He'd left school at 15. He had no degree, no rich parents, no savings, and yet by the time he was 25, he could do three things that millions of young people today can barely imagine. Buy a 3-bed house, run a car, take his family on holiday every single year. It sounds like a lie, but the numbers are real. A typical house cost around £2,700, about 3 years of his wages. Unemployment was often under 3%. Most full-time workers got a pay packet that rose faster than prices. So who was this man? Not a doctor, not a lawyer, not a banker. He was something much more ordinary and far more important. He was the British worker. I am sure you must have done this job, or someone in your house must have done it. In this third part of our series, we're stepping onto the factory floor, down the pit, into the shipyard, and onto the buses to meet the man and woman whose one ordinary wage once held their family and a whole economy together. In 1960s Britain, there was something that sounds like a fairy tale today. The job for life. You joined a company at 16. You learned the trade, you worked your way up, and 40 years later, they gave you a gold watch and a handshake. That wasn't unusual. That was normal. The factory you worked in, your father probably worked there too, and his father before him. The same gates, the same machines, the same faces, year after year. You knew the foreman's name. You knew his wife's name. You knew what his kids were doing at school. Work wasn't just a place you went. It was a community. But here's what really made the difference. And this is the part young people today cannot understand. You didn't just have a job. You had power. Not power like a boss. Power like this. If your factory treated you badly, you could walk out on Monday and have a new job by Friday. I'm not exaggerating. In the early 1960s, unemployment was around 2%, sometimes lower. There were more jobs than workers, so employers couldn't bully you. They couldn't threaten you. They couldn't say, take it or leave it, because you had somewhere else to go. That single fact, more jobs than people, changed everything. It meant wages went up, not down. It meant conditions improved. It meant you were treated like a person, not a number on a spreadsheet. Let me pause here and ask you something. Do you remember your first proper wage rise? Through the 1950s and 60s, real wages, after inflation, rose by about 3 to 4% every year. That doesn't sound like much, but add it up over 10 years, 20 years, the same job, the same hours, and yet every few years, life got a little bit easier. You could afford the twin tub, then the television, then the car, then the better house. Not because you got promoted, not because you worked overtime, just because the economy worked for you. Now here's something we never talk about, and I want you to really think about this. In the 1960s, most working men had something that's almost extinct today, a predictable future. You knew what you'd earn next year. You knew you'd still have your job. You knew the mortgage would get paid. You knew there'd be a pension at the end. There were no 0-hours contracts, no gig economy, no apps telling you if you had work tomorrow. Every Friday, the same brown envelope. Every month, the same bills you could afford. Every year, a little bit more in your pocket. That predictability is worth more than money. It meant you could plan, get married, have children, buy a house, all without gambling on the future. Let me ask you another question. What age were you when you bought your first house? 25? 28? 30? Write it in the comments. I'm genuinely curious, because here's what the numbers tell us. In 1960, the average first-time buyer was in their mid-20s. Today, it's pushing 35, and many never buy at all. But it's not just about age. It's about what you needed to qualify. In the 1960s, you needed a steady job, a small deposit, a reference from your employer, maybe a word from your neighbors. That was it. No credit scores, no algorithms, no computer deciding your future. A man looked you in the eye, shook your hand, and decided if you were trustworthy. Human to human. But here's the part that will really shock you, and I need you to stay with me here, because this explains everything. In the 1960s, a house cost about 3 times a worker's annual wage. 3 times. If you earned £800 a year, a house cost £2,500. Simple maths. Achievable maths. Today, the average house costs 8 to 9 times the average wage. In London and the Southeast, it can be 12 times or more. The same job, relatively the same work, but 4 times harder to buy a home. That's not because young people are lazy. That's not because they buy too much coffee. The numbers simply don't work anymore. Now let me tell you about something else that's almost vanished. The apprenticeship, real apprenticeships, not modern ones where you make tea for free. In the 1960s, a lad left school at 15 and walked straight into a trade. Electrician, plumber, welder, carpenter, mechanic. He was paid, not much, but paid, to learn a skill. The older men taught him. Yes, they teased him, sent him for a left-handed screwdriver or a long stand. But they also showed him how to work. By 20 or 21, he was a qualified tradesman, earning a full wage, with a skill nobody could take away. Are you still with me? Good. Because this next part matters. Let's talk about what happened when things went wrong. Because things did go wrong. Factories closed. Men got injured. People fell ill. But here's what was different. The safety net actually caught you. If you lost your job, there was unemployment benefit. Not luxury, but survival. If you got injured, the NHS was there. No bills, no insurance forms, no bankruptcy. If you got old, there was the state pension. Plus, very often, a company pension on top. You didn't face disaster alone. And that meant something that's hard to put into words. You weren't afraid. Not afraid of illness. The system had your back. Now I want to talk about unions. I know it's a word that divides people, but let me just give you the facts. In 1960, about 40% of British workers were in a union. By the early 1970s, it was closer to 50%, half the workforce. And what did that mean in practice? It meant that when you sat across from your boss, you weren't alone. Millions of workers standing together had a say in their wages, their safety, their holidays. In the 1950s, many workers had just 1 week of paid holiday. By the late 1960s, 2 or 3 weeks was becoming normal. That didn't happen by magic. It happened because working people had a voice loud enough to be heard. Let me pause again. If you were in a union, what union was it? The AEU? The TGWU? The NUM? Something else? Write it in the comments. I'd love to know. Now let's talk about women. Because so far, I've mostly talked about men. But the truth is, women held everything together. Not just at home, though that was a full-time job in itself. Millions of women worked. In factories, on the production lines, often for less pay than men. Often with no recognition. But without them, nothing would have worked. Here's something else that was different. And this might be the most important thing of all. In the 1960s, one wage was enough, one person working, one income, and it paid for the mortgage to the holidays. Not easily, I'm not saying it was easy, but it was possible. Today, most families need 2 incomes just to stay afloat. 2 people working full-time, 2 people exhausted, 2 people missing their children growing up, and still, they can't afford what their grandparents had on a single wage. How did that happen? Let me give you a number that explains everything. In 1960, a typical family spent about 9% of their income on housing. 9%. Today, many families spend 30, 40, even 50% on rent or mortgage. That single change has reshaped everything. Less money for food to less money for savings. No wonder people feel squeezed. They are squeezed. The basic arithmetic of life has been rewritten against them. Let me tell you what I think we've really lost. It's not just money, it's not just houses, it's not just jobs, it's peace of mind. The ability to know, really know, deep in your bones, that tomorrow will be okay, that your job will still be there, that your home is secure, that your children will have it better, that old age won't be a nightmare. In the 1960s, ordinary working people had that peace. Not because they were naive, not because they ignored problems, but because the system worked for them. Wages rose, houses were affordable, jobs were secure, the safety net was real, and that gave people something you cannot buy, the confidence to live. So when we look back and say, those were the good old days, we're not just being sentimental. The numbers back us up. House prices, 3 times wages then, 9 times now. Unemployment, 2 to 3% then, higher and less secure now. One-wage families, normal then, almost impossible now. Wage growth, steady then, stagnant now. Pensions, guaranteed then, uncertain now. The 1960s weren't perfect. The work was hard, the houses were cold, discrimination was real. But the basic deal, work hard, live decently, actually worked, and that's what we miss. But something happened. Somewhere between then and now, the deal was broken. The factories closed, the jobs disappeared, the houses became unaffordable, the safety net got holes in it. How? Why? Who broke the promise? That's what we'll explore in part 4. But first, I need your help. I want to hear your story. What job did you do? What job did your father do? Your mother? How old were you when you bought your first house? Did one wage really cover everything? Do you remember feeling secure? Write it in the comments. Let the younger generation see what life was actually like. And if you're watching this with your children or grandchildren, ask them, do you have what we had? The answer might surprise all of you. Share this video with someone who remembers and someone who needs to know. Subscribe for part 4, where we uncover what went wrong and when the promise started to break. Thank you for watching.